livestream panel conversation focusing on the complicated relationship between grief and mental health. I am Kirsty Smolik, the Vice President of our family-owned and operated funeral home, Park Memorial. This is the first event of its kind for Park Memorial, and we thank those who are taking the time to join us online today. We hope that you are inspired and encouraged by today's conversation. This event would not be possible without the wonderful support from our event sponsors. Park Memorial wishes to thank our presenting sponsor and host, Lexus South Point. Their support of this event shows uncommon corporate empathy and compassion. We honor the commitment of Lexus South Point in helping Park Memorial and our panelists generate connection, communication, and empathy from the dealership outwards to their community at large. Thank you so much, Farley, Cam, and Lexus South Point team. Our thanks also goes today to our panel of experts who are giving their time and expertise to today's discussion. They are all active advocates and support persons in our community who bring passion and excellence to this event. Thank you also to Heidi Wagner, who joins us today to share her personal grief and mental health perspectives since the recent loss of her dad. And thank you to Carrie Doll for lending her passion and for story and human connection through conversation to this event. Our conversation can be followed today via Facebook Live on our Facebook page at facebook.com/parkmemorial and on our YouTube at youtube.parkmemorialcares.com. We invite you to share what inspired you in today's conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag grief and mental health when sharing, and be sure to tag Park Memorial. Our handles are Park Memorial on Facebook and Park Memorial YEG on Twitter and Instagram. Today's live stream event was created to engage our community in a vital and meaningful conversation through an easy access platform, as well as to create awareness for a Finding Grace in Grief event, which is a full day of practical grief support taking place at the Matrix Hotel on Friday, May 10th. We are honored to have two of our Finding Grace in Grief event facilitators joining our panel of experts today. At our May 10th event, Cheryl Salter-Roberts will be presenting a workshop focusing on supporting grieving children and teens, and Blake Lotes will lead a workshop on expressing grief through photography. Details of this event and tickets can be found at findinggraceingrief.com. We will be giving away a ticket also to our Finding Grace in Grief event at the close of today's live stream event. To be entered into our random draw, all you need to do is engage with today's conversation by commenting or asking a question through the live chat feature on either YouTube Live or Facebook Live. The winner will be announced at the close of the event. To claim your prize, please call Park Memorial at 780-426-0050 and ask for Christy Hammond. Why are we holding today's event, you might ask? Park Memorial believes that the service to our families we provide needs to continue beyond the funeral service. As a family-owned and operated organization, we believe in putting families first, and that includes the healing and support of our bereaved families in the communities which we live and where we work. This event joins our monthly Art for the Grieving Heart events, Finding Grace in Grief, our full day of practical grief support, and our biennial grief seminars with Dr. Alan Wolfeld, all part of our unique aftercare programming. The need for this support in our community has been renewed for our organization following the loss of my dad, Jerry Smolik, in 2017. He was our organizational patriarch, beloved husband, father, and grandfather, and my work mentor. And losing him has affected me profoundly, way more than I could have imagined, and I think definitely more than others have realized. As I and my family have walked in our journey of loss while still experiencing the tsunamis of our own grief, we have refocused on the importance of Park Memorial providing service to the community through grief support. Because as we serve, we also begin to heal. We dedicate today's event and its impact to my dad, Jerry. It is now my honor to introduce today's moderator of our panel discussion, Carrie Doll. Carrie comes to this conversation not only professionally, but also personally. She is no stranger to grief and loss and will be sharing from her personal perspective in our time together today. Carrie Doll is a professional emcee, moderator, and keynote speaker. When business leaders are preparing to present new and innovative ideas to propel their company, they call Carrie Doll. Every organization needs to equip themselves with strong storytelling and public speaking skills that will have an impact. This is where Carrie can help. She empowers clients to craft strong messages, walk confidently on stage, and connect with the audience in any setting. Carrie merged her love of coaching, storytelling, and public speaking by becoming a professional emcee, moderator, and keynote speaker following a 20-year career in television journalism. With a desire to equip more people with what she considers to be a life skill, she launched her online course, The Power of Public Speaking. She also believes in the power of story, which is reflected in the interviews she does for her podcast, The Inner Circle with Carrie Doll. Her style is engaging, effective, and dynamic, and leaves her audiences feeling connected and empowered. Carrie was honored as one of the top citizens in the province of Alberta, is the chair of the Stollery Women's Network, an advocacy and fundraising group supporting children's health care. She sits on the board of the John Cameron Changing Lives Foundation that supports mental health initiatives. She is married to entrepreneur Stephen Pataski, who founded and owns the Lexus Group. And she is also the proud mother of 2 children, Kasia and Allegra. Carrie, I turn today's conversation over to you.
Kirsty, thank you so much for that beautiful introduction, and my condolences to you and your family on the loss of your dad. He was a giant in our community, so well respected by so many people and loved by so many people. He made a difference in countless lives, so his memory will be honored by many, many people. Thank you for sharing with us today, and for Park Memorial for hosting such an important discussion today. We truly appreciate it. I love how you began by saying, as we serve, we always heal, and I have to begin by saying it's an honor and a privilege to moderate today's discussion with so many brilliant minds here today. Brilliant minds that will really help us navigate this issue. It's a big one, it's complicated, and I speak from experience because I'm living it right now. 4 years ago, my dad passed away, and a year and a half ago, I lost my mom. My mom was my best friend, and not a day goes by where I don't miss her or pick up the phone to call her only to remember that she's not there. I miss her every single day. I've learned a lot in these last 4 years about grief, about what's apparently normal, what it feels like to love someone so much. It hurts when they're gone. Grieving is a complicated process, as many of us know and understand, and most days right after they passed, I didn't feel normal when I lost my mom and my dad, and I will say that, and I want to be very honest about that. It was until my brother pointed out to me when I said to him, I don't feel normal, and he said, Carrie, this is what grief feels like. Give yourself permission to grieve. He said, it's okay not to be okay, as long as you talk about it. So, I'm with all of you in this discussion today. It's going to be a powerful conversation for all of you, filled with vulnerability, filled with courage, takeaways, learnings, and hopefully healing. To our audience joining us live on Facebook today, thank you for sharing your precious time with all of us. We appreciate the fact that you are holding space for this important conversation we're about to have today. It is now my pleasure to introduce our panel of experts who are donating their time and their expertise to today's discussion. They are all active advocates and in our community who bring incredible perspective to this discussion. I'm going to introduce each one of them, and then we are going to launch into our discussion. I'm going to begin first of all with Carmen Victor, who has a Master's of Education in Counseling Psychology and over 25 years experience in the field. Carmen has a passionate interest in palliative and bereavement counseling. Her path changed drastically, both personally and professionally, when her daughter Haley was diagnosed with cancer and passed away at the age of 5. That was 19 years ago. Following the death of Haley, Carmen decided to use her work and her life experience to provide support to grieving families in a variety of capacities. After working at the Stollery for a number of years, Carmen went on to start her own private practice, Here to There Grief Counseling Services. Carmen's hope for each grieving individual is to help them find their voice again and to build their own resiliency. She believes that with a variety of supports, families can survive horrible circumstances and in time find hope and create movement again. Carmen, thank you so much for being with us today. It's now my pleasure to introduce Kimberly Knuell, registered psychologist and former teacher who worked for Alberta Health Services as a child and adolescent therapist. She is also the co-founder of Momentum Walk-In Counseling Society. It is a mental health triage center helping individuals who cannot pay for or wait for aid through the traditional healthcare system. They are a not-for-profit walk-in agency providing support and guidance to people in need of counseling services. Thank you so much, Kimberly, for being with us today. It's also my pleasure to welcome Heidi Wagner, who is a business owner, busy mom of 4 children, born and raised in Sherwood Park and played many sports growing up, including college basketball. When she's not cheering on her boys playing hockey or her daughter in basketball and dance, you will find her in her happy place, the mountains. Heidi is the oldest of 4 children, and her life was forever changed with the sudden death of her dad, Ted, who she was extremely close to. It will be a year in June that her dad passed away. Heidi says she misses her dad every single day and looks forward to finding happiness again and a new normal. I'd also like to welcome Cheryl Salter-Roberts to the panel. Cheryl began her personal journey with grief after the deaths of both her son Breton and her daughter Sierra, in addition to suffering 6 miscarriages. She is grateful on a daily basis for the opportunity to be the mother to now 4 amazing grown children. Her journey and her studies created the Briar Patch Family Life Education Center in Sherwood Park. Cheryl now works as a grief educator and counselor and manager of the grief support services for Pilgrim's Hospice. She strives to provide education, compassion, and support to all those who are grieving the loss of someone they love. She loves being part of this community and to watch people grow from their own personal grief journeys. Thank you, Cheryl, for being with us today. We're also thrilled to welcome Blake Lotz to the panel. Blake is an Edmonton-based mental health awareness advocate using her skills and her voice as a portrait photographer and former psychiatric nurse to change the narrative around society's understanding of mental health. Blake was first diagnosed with depression and anxiety at the age of 14, and years later, bipolar II disorder at the age of 20. At the time of her diagnosis, she struggled to find people willing to talk openly about their experience and knew something needed to change. Over the last few years, Blake became an active voice in our community, raising awareness and opening the conversation around mental health with her initiative, We All Believe in You. It's a community-driven organization that's focused around shifting the public response to mental health and connecting those struggling with resources. To all of you who are with us today, thank you so very much for being part of our panel. Carmen, I want to begin with you. Many of us on this panel, and I'm sure many of you who are watching at home or at work, wherever you are joining us from, have or are struggling with grief and loss. In your expert opinion, what is considered normal when you're going through the loss of someone you loved?
I get the hard question right away. First of all, thank you for being here with this group of professionals and with our audience through the social media world. One of the things, and you know, you've heard it a few times already, people using that word normal. And really, with grief, that is the reality, is nothing feels normal, and that's why it is so unsettling. So often what I say to some of my families is, I'm here with my expertise to help you learn about what grief is and to learn and let you know that what you're feeling is normal when nothing does feel normal, and to try not to minimize that experience, because as soon as we say to someone, what you're feeling is normal, but it doesn't feel that way. And so it's really important when you're working with grieving families to not minimize that feeling, because it can be overwhelming. It can absolutely be overwhelming.
It's a beautiful way of framing it, and as you do it in that way, Heidi, how does that resonate with you when you hear that as you go through your own journey right now?
Yeah, what you were saying definitely was ringing true for me. I went from having my dad, one day he was at my house mowing my lawn, and the next day he was just gone. And it's really hard because he was the youngest of 8 kids, and so I just expected to have him around in my life a lot longer. And there's a whole sort of host of feelings kind of after losing him, and feeling angry and alone and confused and all of these things. And as a mom and an adult, it was kind of hard to sort of try to go through those things and still be strong for my kids. And I think that what this experience has really taught me is that I'm not alone. In those weeks, in those kind of first few months after, it was really hard to reach out to people, and it was the friends that just kind of kept checking up on me and just being there and talking to them, and realizing that I had other friends out there that have lost parents just like I did. And the best piece of advice they gave me was just to allow myself to grieve and let go of any expectations. I feel like there was times that some days I just wanted to watch my dad's slideshow or look at pictures and drink a glass of wine, and letting go of some of that guilt and just accepting where I was at was a really hard lesson, and really something I still have to kind of remind myself of. So yeah.
Appreciate you sharing that, Heidi, and Carmen framed it so beautifully, not to minimize it, and that there is no normal in this. But Cheryl, I'd like you to weigh in on this as a grief counselor who lost 2 children. I've always wondered, because I do have friends as well who have lost children, is the grief different when you are grieving children as opposed to grieving your mom and dad?
In addition to losing my children, I've also experienced the death of my dad, but I lost my children first. And so when I had some dear friends who embraced me and my husband and our other children and said, this is the most difficult thing you will ever go through, and we can say that for sure. But I also kept hearing, I understand how you feel. I lost my dad last year. I lost my mom. When my dad died 4 years later, I waited for the same grief to overcome me. And grief did take over my life. And it's still there because I miss my dad every day as well. And it's been about 16 years now. But it was a very different grief. I was able to continue on a little bit easier than losing my children. It's a unique grief when we lose our children or our babies because we don't expect it to happen. We do expect our parents to die, our grandparents to die, other family members in time, friends. We don't seek out pregnancy and parenthood with the idea that one day we'll bury our child. So it is quite different for most of us.
Let's bring in the mental health talk into this conversation, going through loss for someone. Kimberly, what are the mental health issues that could be tied to all of these feelings that we're all expressing so far?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think any time that people experience stress can be a time when maybe some pre-existing conditions can show up. But grief itself isn't a mental health diagnosis, and most of the time does not trigger a mental health crisis. But like I say, there could be something that has been underlying, that is brought out by the stress of it. So, it's just really important, I would say, anyone going through periods of grief, which we all do at some point, to really just keep checking in with friends and family. And if anyone does express a concern that maybe it's time to seek the help of your doctor or a psychologist, that be open to listening to that maybe this is something that has gone on to the point where it's impacting your life in a different way than grief typically would.
You open the door for an interesting point, just to reach out and see a doctor. Blake, I'm going to bring you into this conversation because I know you feel strongly about connecting with people and empowering all the different types of groups and individuals that you talk to talk about how you're feeling, to reach out. So give us your perspective on why that's so important, because you sought help at a young age and you said it was the best thing that happened in your life.
Yeah, so I was fortunate to get care from my mental health issues at a very young age. So started at the age of 14 getting help for what I was struggling with. And so I really encourage people to reach out when they have those resources available to them, or to seek out those resources for themselves. It has been so beneficial and saved my life in so many ways. And one of the best ways that I've really helped with my own mental health is by reaching out to not just professionals, but also people who just kind of get it and have been there and understand. And that's kind of what the work that I do now is, just by creating community so that you have someone to talk to and say, like, I don't know if what I feel is normal, or I feel really alone and isolated in my struggle, or this happened to me. Like, did that happen to you? Because we often get so isolated in our own grief and isolated in our own emotion that can just fester and become worse and worse and worse. So yeah, I highly encourage people to come together and create community within that grief and suffering, and it can be really helpful and beneficial to everybody to just be more open and honest and collaborate together with their grief. So
I want to take that a step further on the open and honesty, because we were having a pre-discussion before we started this, and the topic was on suicide, and you said that you were speaking with a group of high school students, and if someone confides in you and says, but I'm feeling this way, or I'm thinking about suicide, but don't tell anybody, your response to them is what? And you feel this is a very important conversation to have.
well, I really believe that, like, the suicide conversation is essential. Like, we need to be talking about this more openly and honestly, because it's the only way we can save lives. It's, for many years we've been told that this is a conversation we shouldn't have. It implants ideas into people's heads. Well, that's been proven to be false. But yeah, it's definitely an important conversation to be had. And also, when it comes to that question of, like, if someone reveals that they are struggling with thoughts of suicide or a plan, it's just not a secret you can keep. It's it's an emergency. So a lot of teens are worried about revealing this secret, but even for myself, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I had a friend who was struggling with thoughts of suicide, and I had to go to work, and I couldn't help her in that immediate term, so I called her parents. And so even not as a teenager, we can go through these things, and I understood that by calling her parents, there was a possibility of me losing her friendship, but losing a friendship is more important than losing a life. So that's what I teach all the teenagers that I work with and all the humans that I work with, because it's just not a secret that we can keep.
That's powerful perspective. Thank you very much for sharing. I want to open this question up to the whole panel, so whoever feels inclined to jump in, please do so. But isn't grief a normal and necessary emotion to go through after you've lost someone? Carmen, you want to hop in?
Yes, it is. It's just that grief doesn't have a language that we know, right? Until you grieve someone, you don't know the depths of what that is. And so then you have to try and find a way to express it, and express it in a healthy way. But what is healthy with that big, big emotion?
What do you mean by express it?
So to actively mourn, right? So we find ways, and whether it's through, expressive arts is a wonderful way, whether it's journaling, whether it's writing, whether it's photography, whether it's through music, whether it's through movement, finding a way to express it and give it language. And I know for myself, one of the things that I struggled with was in an area that I believed in terms of being able to verbally express oneself. When it came to try to tell someone the depths of sorrow that I felt when my daughter died, there were no words. And so that's why I say it's so important to find a language that works for your heart, but to express it, you know, what does Alan L. Wolfelt call that? To actively mourn, right? To find a way to express it. And often when it first comes out, it is frightening. It's frightening for the person grieving, and it's frightening for people to witness, right? And so it's to try and find supports that will sit with you and hear you and allow you to express it without shutting you down or without judgment.
Do you want to weigh in on this with your expertise in the area and tie into mental health into this?
Yeah, well, you know what really is brought up for me while you're talking is that so many of our clients experience grief, but don't connect it with the concept of what they're experiencing with the concept of grief, because perhaps someone hasn't died, but there is a loss. So there could be a loss of a relationship, the loss of a job, the loss of what they thought their future would be. And there's a grief process that needs to happen anytime there's a loss. And it could be, you know, my daughter lost a toy the other day. And for her, it was as real as if something had died. And, you know, I think we really, as a society, you know, need to get better about talking about it and acknowledging what grief can be, and understanding that it can be more widespread than when we simply have a death. It can include a lot of different things, and I think the more we talk about it then and can experience grief in small ways, we can then get better at grieving when big things do happen.
Heidi, how does this make you feel?
Yeah, I was going to ask if I could weigh in. I think actually hearing just this whole idea of expressing grief and finding what that means kind of to you individually is something that actually, as I'm going on this journey right now, has really kind of stuck with me. And that's where I know when we talked the other day, I said, I mean, really, the last few months, my journey has really just been about finding my happiness again and just finding the things that bring joy into my life, because I feel like since I lost my dad, there's this kind of this hole in my heart, just this part that's just like, you know, he's never coming back, is gone. And so it's just been learning to kind of navigate through our days without him. And I think one of the hard things too is we do have a big family and a very close family. And the one thing too with grief is, in my experience with my siblings and stuff and my family, it's grief looks a little bit different for all of us too. And I think that's sometimes really hard, is accepting where I'm at in the journey, and it might be different from where my siblings are, or my aunts and uncles and, you know, extended family and stuff like that as well. And so last week, there was one other thing that I did, that same thing. I was just trying to find something to kind of just keep a piece of my dad for all of us. And so my mom has donated some of his clothes, but he had a closet still full of his shirts. And so I had gone, and all of the kids, the grandkids, kind of picked out shirts that were special to them of their grandpa. And so for my kids, there was, you know, pajama pants that we had matching pajamas at our cabin one year, and going to Hawaii with grandma and grandpa. And so the kids kind of picked all these things that are special, but I packed them up last week, and they had been sitting in my house for about 2 months, and I didn't realize how hard it would be to actually just physically pack the shirts up. I sort of wrote a little page for each of my kids and the other grandkids, and kind of packaged them all up, and it was really hard to take that box to the post office and mail it. And but I look forward to kind of, just getting these little memory bears back for the kids, and just sort of something for us to hold on to.
Cheryl, you were nodding in agreement on a lot of things that Heidi said.
Oh, don't get me started. I will talk forever. First, I want to start with one of my favorite quotes. I collect quotes. I think that's one of the things that actually helped me, is to collect quotes. They're up on my wall. One of my favorites is, grief is the ultimate price we pay for love. And I believe the author I can give credit to is Rose Kennedy. We all experience grief in our own way. It is very unique, even in a family, and this can be very, very confusing to families with children and other family members, that on any given day, everyone will be all over the place, and that's normal. we live in a society where we say you get 3 days off work and that's it. We expect your grief to be tidied up, packaged up, and off you go. And so we need to create more of a community that allows for expression, allows for the time that it takes for grief to unravel and become what it is, and honor it in so many ways.
I love that you said that, to create a community, and I'm going to go right to you, Michael, because that's what you did with your project, We All Believe in You. And what has that done to get the conversation going? What changes has that brought for you and for so many people that you know, creating that sense of community and that opening the door to conversations?
Well, it's interesting because I was listening to Carmen talking about how people express grief in like artistic ways, or finding a language that you can express your grief in. And it reminded me that my entire We All Believe in You actually started basically August 11, 2014, when Robin Williams died by suicide. Robin was a hero of mine, and I tell students, like, when I was diagnosed in 1994 and nobody was talking about mental illness, I felt very, very isolated and very alone, and I had to go to the library. I wanted to find people that I could connect with and understand who had mental health issues. So because there was no Google, I went to the library and looked up famous people with mental illnesses, and I found Robin Williams. And for me, he always held a truth that I could have a mental illness and still be a very giving person to society in terms of like joy and laughter, and Robin was that for me. And when he died by suicide, I experienced a lot of grief that I never thought that I would have, because, you know, he was someone I never met. He was famous. But when he died, I always say that I feel like a piece of myself died as well. And for me, that's why I started the photo project, is because I wanted people to be having more open, honest conversations about mental illness and suicide. And so I started photographing and interviewing people. And what I learned through the 60 plus interviews that I did is that people with mental health struggles are really feeling alone and isolated, and really strive or need this sense of community and people who understand, and just friends who get it. And so for me, I've always had a very strong belief in community and the healing power of community. And so I started a Facebook group for these people that I had photographed. And before I knew it, it was growing and growing and growing. And it's just because I think it's a basic essential need that people are struggling, when they're struggling with their mental health, need to feel a part of something. And so it kind of just morphed from there, and now we go on dog walks together, or we have meetings together. But generally, community has been such a saving factor for a lot of people, and to watch the progress that people have had from when we very first started to now is unbelievable. So yeah, it's been pretty cool.
Well, that is, it's such a phenomenal project and such great perspective. Please go ahead, Carmen.
Sorry, I just want to say, just to go back to, because we're having that conversation about supports, and I know that when families first come, you know, you do a kind of that intake, you know, the pre and what are you experiencing now, and supports is so important in that. Who do you consider your supports? Through family, friends, church, my yoga for grief class, like, where are your supports? And I always included that. And do you have a good family physician that you trust? Because what I share with families is that none of us are immune to mental health issues, none of us. And the other thing is, we've been talking about how heavy grief is. We can't predict what next year will look like for us in our grief. And we often have, and we had talked about this earlier, kind of an idea of what it should be like or how I should proceed. And grief kind of has its own path. And so it's really important, supports, community, and making sure you do have a good family physician that you trust.
So on that note, if grief has its own path, I want you all to comment on this, because everyone has their own way of processing this. But if someone, like many of us, have gone through the loss, and a year from now or 2 years from now or 10 years from now, they say, I just don't feel normal. I still miss that person. What do you say in response? Is that okay? Is that still grief? How do we process that?
Yeah, I think it is okay. And I mean, I'm still very new on my journey, but I think the hard thing with grief too is that for me now it's like more good days than bad days, but it's not like I'm a runner, so it's not like, you know, you have a start and a finish line, or you're climbing up a mountain and you have like a finish point to get to. I feel like there's days I'm kind of going along, and then it'll be like the littlest thing will happen, and it just like sucks me back down or back into the rabbit hole, as I sometimes will call it. And I think from talking with friends who have suffered loss, but it has been further removed, they've said the same thing, whether it's been 8 years or 10 years or 20 years, they still miss their parent, and just like I miss my dad. But so when those moments come up, because for me, some of the days it's just, I'll have a day where I'm crying all day. And last week I was at the gym, and we went on the rowing machine, and we bought my dad a rowing machine 2 years ago for Christmas. And so it was like the whole way home, that's kind of just brought a whole bunch of emotion back for me. And so yeah, I think that, I know everybody says time heals, and with time it will get easier, but I think that there's still going to be hard days, whether it's tomorrow or 5 years from now or 10 years from now. So
Kimberly?
Yeah, there's no question. Yeah. And I think, you know, when you talk to people who have lost significant people in their lives, you will always miss them. There will always be grief for them. I don't think that goes away. I think that you process different parts of it as time goes on, but you will always miss that person, and that's just what it is. Yeah.
Any other want to weigh in before you? Carmen, you look like you wanted to say.
I do, but go ahead, Cheryl.
I'm going to say 23 years in since we lost our son, which will be his anniversary, his birthday next week. My hope for my family, but my hope for my clients as well, and even community, is that we each find our own healthy way to focus on our grief and work through it. For me, it's been art. We built a house a few years ago. We jokingly said we built an art studio with a house attached to it because I focus so much on the art studio, but that's my place now. But 23 years in, every day is still a struggle. I will not forget. It is not going away. But I've come to a place of understanding that this is my journey, and how I deal with it, and then how I project it to community is unique, and I honor it. And that's what I always hope for my clients and families. They find their way.
Yeah. I think it was just that the comment about the time. It's what you do with the time. It's how you create ritual and memory and honor that person, because you will always miss them. And I always say, how could you not? When someone that important has been part of your life, how would you not miss them?
I wanted to add in really quickly, and the audience out there might think it's a little crazy, but I share this with my clients, and I hear many of them are doing this now. Next week on my son's birthday, we will have a birthday. We will have a cake. We will say our little happy birthday to him. We don't send out invitations. There's no big party, but for us, it's still every year. And my children expect that now, even as advanced in age they are. We'll get a call from my son in Vancouver. What cake did you pick out? Do I get to see a picture? So for us, that's healing and honor.
I'm going to ask you why. What's the why behind that?
The why started on what would have been his first birthday. It was his first birthday. My children, being so young at the time, asking, so are we making a cake for Breton, or are we going to buy a cake? And so suddenly this idea of a cake popped into our heads, and we thought for the first year, absolutely. So we invited the grandparents, a couple close friends, and all of us, and we had a cake, and we sang happy birthday. And the following year, I just assumed that we would carry on, and on his day, maybe we would just say his name. I wasn't sure what's going to happen. And a few days before, the children started saying, what kind of cake are we getting this year, Mommy? So it's stuck. And
it's a beautiful tradition, a great way to think about approaching that.
Exactly.
I'm going to turn the tables. I want to hold space for people who perhaps haven't gone through a loss in their life, and And the reason I want to go here is I think one of the most difficult parts of grief is knowing what to say. And I found that with my own friends is when I lost my mom, or my dad, and then my mom, some didn't call. I didn't hear from them. And time went by and nothing. And I wanted to be respectful to them, but I think it's because they just didn't know what to say. And let's be honest, it's very difficult to know what to say until you've gone through it. And then your feelings and your perspective changes. Blake, you have a beautiful way with words, and you've educated so many people with language on how to deal not only with mental health and challenges and the words to use, but what's some advice that you could give us in knowing what to say in the most difficult circumstances?
You know, I struggle with knowing what to say, you know, because I'm a fixer. I'm the person who wants to take away a person's pain, and I get uncomfortable when I can't do that, right? It's been hard for me. I've never experienced a large loss, and so grief is something that I'm learning about actually through the We All Believe in You community who have experienced grief. And from what I've learned from them and through the way that I can support my friends through loss and grief is just by really holding space for them and always letting them know that I'm there for them and that I care about them. And it goes a lot beyond just saying, like, sending love and light, or you know what I mean? Like, there's more to it than that. And just by always dropping in and reminding them that you're there and that you really care about them. And one of the most amazing things when I was really struggling with my mental health, I have this friend who just sent me a text and was like, I'm on my way over. I'm going to make you some soup and I have some bread, and you don't have to say a thing to me. I'm just going to be there, and I'm just going to hold space for you, and I'm going to make you this soup. And for me, that was one of the most supportive things that someone could have done for me. And I've tried to take a lot. I learned a lot from that, and I try and use that in my own life now, because it really, really helped. But everything I'm learning about grief and loss is from other people's experience. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's an interesting journey for myself. So,
thank you. Kimberly, will you help us out in this regard too? I'm going to ask all of you this question.
I also lost my mother 6 years ago. You know, it was pretty interesting. A lot of my friends hadn't gone through the loss of a parent, and you're, absolutely, I was surprised at the people that didn't reach out, but I was also surprised at the people that did. And quite often it was people I didn't even know that well. I think what was really beautiful for me was to get flowers. And because I think people didn't know what to say, but I would get lovely little bouquets showing up at my door with a lovely note, and that meant a ton to me. But Brene Brown actually talks about this quite frequently, and she definitely acknowledges when we say nothing, how hurtful it can be. But I agree that people don't always know what to say. And I think what's super important isn't letting people know that you know what they're going through, because you probably don't or may not, but to let them know that you are there for them. And you can literally say, I'm not sure what to say, but I'm here for you, whatever you need. You just let me know. And food is wonderful. You know, when people bring food, simply sitting with people is wonderful. I think another thing that was a bit hurtful to me was a good friend of mine, you know, just a few months after my mom passed away, I kind of had been talking about how hard things had been. And there wasn't an acknowledgement at all, or I guess acknowledgement that my mom had passed away and that could still be impacting me. And I think, you know, that was super hurtful. So when people say this is still impacting me, to believe them and to acknowledge, like, you know, maybe you think that it should only impact them for a week or a year, but it can still be impacting them, and just to let them know that, okay, I hear you. This is still something that's coming up for you regularly. You know, that's important.
I think it's really important to be honest and vulnerable when you're the person who is not the one experiencing grief too, by just saying like, I don't know how to help, but I really want to help. Or even like your friend, if she was experiencing her own grief or loss recently or something, and just by saying like, I'm having a hard time supporting you because I'm experiencing my own grief or loss, I just want you to know that I love you and I care about you and I'm here for you. But just having the person who is not like is trying to provide support, just being honest too, and you don't have to shift the focus to yourself, but by just being honest about where you're coming from can really help. I know when I was struggling with my mental health a lot, it was really nice to hear people say like, this is really hard for me because of X, Y, and Z, but I do really love and care about you. So
I really love that because it can trigger us.
Yeah.
Right? And absolutely, if we can just be open about that, I think that really helps everyone's understanding.
This is why I think it's so important to have this conversation, because there's so many takeaways. I've learned so much listening here. How has this helped you as you're hearing this? I'm sure you've had interesting conversations with friends, family, as you navigate your way.
Yeah, and definitely the comments made resonate 100% too. I think I shared with you as well that I was surprised too after the funeral. Everybody's there and there's a lot of support, and kind of that those days around the funeral, although all of that's such a blur. And I also had friends that I really thought would be there to support me after losing my dad, and didn't hear from them. And then a few other people that just kind of showed up in my life that I didn't really know that they were there. And the one thing I would say is, after having gone through a loss like this, is just show up and just be there. Like you said, Blake, to just kind of hold space. For me, I know I felt just really alone, and I felt like nobody understands what I'm going through. Like there's no way anybody else can understand just like how sad I am. And it was a struggle in the beginning just to move past living in fear. Really, I found that, it was like my dad, I felt like his life was cut short. And for a few weeks after, I kept saying to my husband, I'm just so afraid something's going to happen to me. And, we've got 4 kids, and it was just like, how do I, get past that? And it was just friends just reaching out. And sometimes it wasn't even them saying anything, but it was sending me a quote that they saw, or a Bible verse, or something. And I didn't need to message them back. I didn't need to maybe get together with them, but it was just knowing that they were thinking about me and they cared, and that there was people out there. Because when you're kind of in that space where you're feeling all alone and you're feeling just in that dark space, like I didn't have the strength to reach out to anybody and to say, you know what, like I want somebody just to show up on my doorstep and just be there with me. And I think now that I've kind of gone through it, looking back, I have said to a few friends, I just wish you would have just shown up. And I think that before having gone through this too, I would see somebody who suffered a loss, and my mom might kill me because I know she said this too. It's just, people say to you, just let me know if you need anything. And sometimes you just don't have the strength, or you don't even know what you need. Yeah. And so again, it's just people kind of just showing up and being there, and just, letting you know that they care. And
that I don't know what to say, but I'm here.
Yeah. There's a book I read too that I'll have to look up the title, but it's written from a friend's perspective of walking through a cancer journey with a friend. And that rang out in that book so true, where it was like, sometimes you just need to go pick up a meal and drop it off, or just flowers, or, whatever it is, and not wait for the person to kind of reach out. And so that would be, I think, one of the biggest things that I would say to somebody who just doesn't know what to say is just, just send something, just let them know that you
Bring
care.
bread and soup.
I talk about that experience in pretty much, because people ask me all the time, like, what do you do? How do you help? Blah, blah, blah. And that was one of the most life-changing experiences for me, because it showed me how to care for others when they're struggling, because it made such a difference. And when you're experiencing grief or any sort of mental health struggle at all, you don't know what you need. You're too afraid to ask for what you need, and you don't want the responsibility of like hosting someone, or you don't want to put that face on, and you don't want to have to take it all away to make other people comfortable. So you just would rather sit in your loneliness and your isolation. So for her to just show up and to be there and to say, and I think what was the biggest part is when she said, like, I have no expectations of you for this. So we'll just be together. And
Like, don't even clean your house.
don't clean your house.
That's
Don't put on
important,
your makeup.
Right.
You don't even have to wear
Yeah.
a bra. Like, just
Like people that you didn't have to message back,
Yeah.
right? That sometimes you don't have the energy to respond.
Yeah.
You're grateful, but you don't have the energy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my one friend, I always just had said, I said, I don't want to be a bother and a burden. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I felt. And I think it was just that reminder where it was like, you're not a burden and I'm your friend and I'm here for you. And it was kind of, again, I think as a fixer and as a mom, it's like, yeah, I'm always trying to just make sure everybody is okay and happy and safe. And so it was really kind of hard to kind of have the roles reversed and be in a position where, yeah, I just needed to kind of have somebody just there showing me that they cared and letting me know that, yeah, I matter and it's okay. Like, all of this is okay.
I think the only other thing that I would add, because all of these ideas are great, I would say have the courage to ask the person about who they're grieving,
Oh, that's good.
right? Use their name. And so tell me about your dad. You know, I found out you bought a rower for him, right? Like, let them talk about
great
the
advice.
person that they're missing, right? And hear it. And there may be tears. There may be laughter, because sometimes we share a memory and it's a funny story, right? You can still, it's to share it, right? And so ask them about the person they're missing.
That's great.
In our grief programs at the Pilgrims Hospice, and even with our baby and child loss programs at the Briar Patch, we often ask our participants what the most comforting thing was that someone said to them, because we like them to always keep that as something to hold on to, but also we ask them, what's the worst thing that someone said to you? And often that list is longer than the comforting, so we need to do some work there. But the thing that I would like to add in is when we give condolences and we give our love and expressions to anyone who is grieving, it's often right at the beginning. We need to remember that grief is a journey, and that 6 months in, let's check in. How are you doing, Heidi? It's been almost a year. And have those honest opportunities for the story to continue and the tears to come.
What about the judgment that comes with grief? Because I'm going to throw this out there, that I lost a friend when my mother passed, because all I had in me at the time was to be able to send a text and to say that she was gone. I couldn't pick up the phone. I was so broken, and I couldn't even say the words because I couldn't get them out. I was crying so bad. And one close friend said, I can't believe that you thought that was appropriate to tell me through a text. You didn't have the wherewithal to pick up the phone and call me and tell me that news. And to this day, it still hurts. And I was like, and there's the judgment that can come from that situation. How do we cope with that? How do we process that?
Well, you know, I think having conversations like this are so important, because death and dying are very taboo topics in our culture. And what comes up for me when I hear that is that many people are not comfortable with the process. Many people aren't experienced with the process of grief, and likely that brought up something for your friend, right? And that may have had to do with something else. And but awareness and the vulnerability to say things like, you know, it really hurt my feelings when I didn't hear from you, and using it as a conversation starter. And an exploration of, oh, wow, I didn't, realize that, and here's where I was coming from. I mean, you can really take those as opportunities to get to know each other and to learn and grow. But in the moment, it is often quite hurtful.
And it was.
Yeah.
Blake,
So,
you gave me the full,
no question.
whoa, what just happened there?
Yeah, well, it's for me, it's not really about that person, it's not really about and I think that a lot of these traumas and people in our lives can really teach us a lot about a human. And, you know, maybe, I don't know if you guys are still friends, but it teaches you a lot about a human, you know, and I think Kim handled it in a much more professional and empathetic manner than I probably would have. So, but I understand why you would be very hurt. So,
I had someone say to me, now it was an elderly uncle, and this was, it was 5 months after our daughter had passed away, and I was actually at a funeral because my cousin's daughter had died. And this elderly uncle said, he said, "It's so good to see you. You're all better now." And it hurt, like still profoundly hurt. In time, though, I recognized he just wanted me to be okay. He needed me to be okay. And I honestly was so shocked I didn't know what to say, so I didn't say anything. But I think that, you know, that statement, you know, about we want people to be okay, so how can I fix it? And I expect it to be different. And that's when we are putting what we think it should look like rather than accepting where that person is at, right?
And your friend, not trying to defend your friend, but perhaps, I don't know, maybe had not been through an experience similar and wouldn't know really what to expect from you as the griever. And maybe your expectation was, you should have picked up and called me. Your reality is you probably didn't have the energy. It's not in your capacity in the moment. I'm hoping that that friendship will come back. But sometimes it takes that individual to have a similar experience for them to go, oh, wait a second, what did I do? What did I say to Carrie? Because now here I am, and I can't even get a shower into me today.
Thank you.
And I think that's really the biggest message, especially when we're dealing with someone who's grieving. You can't see that on the outside, right? But it is as difficult as facing an illness, and your ability to cope with life is vastly diminished and can be for quite a long time. So yeah, to hold space as people, comforting, to just understand that very much there's a diminished capacity, which we've heard from, and then on the flip side of it, you know, trying to look at the message behind the words, because so many people intend well wishes and good feelings for you, but trust me, when you're in the moment, which I was as well, there are a few things I wish I didn't hear. So yeah, just patience on both sides.
totally. Because I think that people make mistakes, you know, people make errors in the way they help. And I think that sometimes that fear, like, I know that I can get really debilitated by my fear of not knowing the right thing to say or the right way to help. And that can prevent me from doing anything at all, which in some ways is much worse than doing something and messing it up. So, yeah, I don't know. We all make mistakes, so.
Or just come out and say, I'm going to mess this up.
Yeah,
So let's just put that on the table.
Yeah.
Well,
But I really want to be here for you.
I started with saying, I'm not sure what to say.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? It's really, it's difficult to navigate.
It is.
Right?
I had a friend who said to me, I'm scared I'm going to hurt you, so I'm just going to back off and let you do this. And I'm like, no, please don't back off. And it doesn't matter what you say, I just need you.
Yeah, forgiveness
She was honest.
and letting go. I had this Christmas, it was really hard doing Christmas cards this year, and after losing my dad, we ended up having to put our dog of 16 years down in November, which was really hard. Even just with a pet, it was like the fact that we had to make that decision was really hard. So when I sent my Christmas card out this year, it was like I had our family picture on there and my dog, and talked about that a little bit. And I had one relative send back my Christmas card and tell me it was completely distasteful and disrespectful. And I was crushed. I was like, again, it just was like a huge blow. And again, I kind of felt like I had to defend my grief. And it was like, of course I miss my dad, but it's my Christmas card. Like, do I need to like announce, like everybody who's close to me and knows me knows I lost my dad this year, right? And so I think sometimes it's just yeah, people sometimes just don't think. And so it was really, really hard to just sort of forgive and not let that negativity sort of bring me down, because yeah, I had a lot of tears over that too.
No doubt. I want to bring this into the conversation. This was an important point at Park Memorial's Art for the Grieving Heart event. Last week, the focus on the conversation led to the guilt of grief. So those who lost loved ones to overdoses, let's say on medication or to cancer, or maybe they should have detected it earlier, pushed their family member to go get testing earlier, or family members that they lost perhaps to was death by suicide with drug overdoses, and then guilt manifests itself in those situations, and then you hear things like, I didn't see his or her struggles, I didn't spend enough time with her, I didn't say I love you enough. So and then many people try to make up in death what they should have done in life. It could be something as overspending at funerals to making rash decisions. So what, in your opinion, do people need to understand about the guilt of grief?
Well, that's a really interesting and complicated question, because sometimes the people we've lost are people we don't always have a good relationship with, and so or the way they passed was complicated, and that definitely adds another layer of complexity to the grief, and I just want to acknowledge that.
I want to add in just when we talk about what is normal grief, for anyone grieving, at some point will feel a measure of guilt. We can have our loved one live to 98 and pass away quietly in their sleep, like the most beautiful kind of way you could die. No illness, no drama, no trauma. And somewhere along the line, we as the grievers will still feel some guilt. I wasn't there that night. I didn't spend that last dinner with this individual, whatever. We'll find something in our brain that will tell us that there was something we could have done.
And that's so true. I mean, Teresa Rondo has done lots of studies in the areas of grief work, and I want to say there was like 8 different categories of the different types of grief that bereaved parents could feel with the death of their child. And so grief and guilt, they often go hand in hand. I once worked with a physician, and she said, I'm always amazed at the lengths and degrees that parents will find to make themselves feel guilty. And guilt will be part of the grief journey to some degree. And I think it's to acknowledge where it is in terms of what degree it exists.
And when there's a direct relationship, so someone dying from a drug overdose, so there's the grief because you've lost that person, but then there is that whole capacity around how they died, and so it's like a double whammy of trying to figure it out. Lots of energy.
I think you can have a little bit of the guilt too. My dad didn't. There wasn't that sort of a situation around his death, but I think it's just normal to feel like. He had type 2 diabetes, and it was a complication to his medication, and so it was like, oh, well, we should have. I think it's just human nature to try to think of the things that maybe we could have controlled, and so for us it was a little bit of, well, maybe we should have made Dad exercise more, and we should have made him eat better, and we should have done this, and then again it was coming to that realization that it was like, you know what, he lived his life the way he wanted to live his life, and we're not in control of when he passes, and so it's just kind of sort of trusting in trusting in sort of the plan and the process. And so for me it was hard, but very freeing, and
Removing the judgment.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like death, it can be like when someone dies that you love, it's a complete loss of control. You have completely had control taken away from you. And guilt is almost you trying to regain that control of the scenario. That makes a lot of sense. So, yeah.
And I have to say, too, that hindsight's 20/20. And I think that gets the better of us sometimes, but really acknowledging for most of us, because we're pretty decent human beings on this planet, I believe, that we did the best we could with the information we had at the time.
And I think it gets even messier when it's a suicide, and that people really believe that, like, or they really think or wonder if there was something they could have done more, or that person looked really healthy and I didn't know that they were struggling so much, and it's just very complicated. People, you know, and how could a person get to that point that they felt that that was the only thing that they could do, or how selfish of them, or blah blah blah, you know? And so it gets even more complex when it's a suicide. And so yeah, I've had to do like a lot of working with people to understand that, you know, it's not as simple as that. So yeah.
I want to ask about, I guess I'll call it community grief, and I think the most recent situation that comes to mind is the Humboldt tragedy. I mean, media infiltrates our lives every day, every second of the day, in a variety of capacities. And I think, and I hope I'm not overstating this, and please correct me if you feel I am, is this that, like, everyone was affected by that. You watched that, and it was just, it was crushing to watch parents go through this, and the children of their brothers and sisters that were lost. And it was so hard to process, and it continues today because there were so many lives lost. But that's not the only story. That was the one that was closest to home for us as of late. So what should we do in these circumstances? What do we need to learn about these circumstances and how we handle them and process them?
That's a really good question. I definitely got a lot of phone calls that day from media to comment. And I think, you know, resoundingly, what was so helpful to people was to talk to each other and come together as a community. And communities really all over Canada. But I saw a lot of my neighbors, and I had to borrow a hockey stick, but, you know, put out hockey sticks for them. I know there's been a ton of fundraising efforts, just messages of love and support to the families. I mean, and there's certainly players that are still alive and struggling, and I think that's what we do. We can grieve together as a community. And I know every time I hear still, a couple days ago, heard another story about a young man who's really struggling to regain his life after that accident. Yeah, we just keep being the compassionate people that we are, and keep reaching out, and because that story's not over for these families. No. You know, and I think that's kind of what we've already touched on is we can only imagine what it's like after this much time has passed, and it's still, I'm sure, as fresh for them as the day it happened. So yeah.
I want to share a little quick story. We still have our hockey sticks out on our front veranda. And that comes from an 8-year-old in my life, my little grandson, who realized as we drove to school each day, he started counting the hockey sticks and seeing who put a hockey stick out and who didn't. And he was wondering why some people didn't. And then about a month after, I said to him, Beckett, I think it's probably time we maybe take our hockey sticks inside. And he said, but why? Everybody else is. But if we take ours in, those families are going to think nobody cares about them any longer. So just his little perception of these hockey sticks meant we are sharing love, we are caring. In my community the other day, after the killings at the mosques in New Zealand, our community came together and went to our mosque, and everyone stood outside with flowers and just wishes and notes just to say, we can't take your pain away, but we can be here to say you're thought of.
I do want to bring awareness that when community events happen, and you have someone who's recently bereaved, sometimes they have to really moderate how much of that news and social media they are watching, because to take on more grief, you are carrying your own grief. So I often, when I'm working with families, and they'll tell me what they're watching or not watching, and I'll just say to be cautious for themselves. It's okay to step back, because it can really become an additional burden to your grief as well. So just that word of caution. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you don't care. It's just that you have to care for yourself in this.
Because there's lots of triggers in
Yes.
those situations that
Yeah.
we all need to be aware of and respectful of
Yeah.
when that's happening. I want to move into, I want to ask I guess is it a clinical question, and it's more for takeaways of those watching. Are there 5 stages or 7 stages of grief? And what are they? And does
You're looking at me,
everybody,
right? No.
does everybody go through them? I need to be educated on this here.
There aren't really any logical stages.
Good answer. Throw that book away.
A lot of the new models look at what they call like a dual processing model, whereas I'm in grief, and then there's days where I went to work today and it was an okay day. Does that mean I'm not grieving? And then 2 days later, I am grieving again. So we talk about a dual processing model more, and in that we can expect guilt and anger, and some of those stages we like to. I mean, the reason the stages stuck was because they resonated for people, right? And there is some truth in them, and that's why we still hear people talking about the stages. Kubler-Ross did amazing work, but that's just, we don't look at, I'll do this and then this and then this. It doesn't move in that kind of a process. So it's more the dual process. That's one type of model that we look at.
And more in the mental health world, you hear the term recovery and in the mental health world, and I've been challenging that perception about recovery, because we're talking about, when you say recovery, it's an assumption that you will get better. And same thing with grief. If there's stages, the assumption then becomes that, okay, so you're going to go through this stage, and then you're going to go through this stage, and then someday you'll be better because you've gone through all the stages. Well, grief is not like that. Like, it's all over the place. And same thing with mental illness. I will never not have bipolar disorder. I will always have bipolar disorder. And there will be days when I'm doing really well, and there will be days when I'm really not doing well. So to assume and to say that I'm recovering from my mental illness is to assume that one day I won't have it. And that's not the case. So, I can see why, we're moving away from the stages of grief. And so, yeah.
The word I love to use is incorporating.
Yeah.
So with my families, when we talk about, because they often ask, when will I acknowledge or accept this? When will I be done? When it will be over? But when we introduce the word incorporating it into their life and finding a place for it, bring it out as we need it, put it back when we need to break from it when we can, seems to help.
Anyone else want to weigh in? Okay. There's something else I hear a lot is in processing grief, is some people say that I'm worried that if I stop grieving, I'm going to forget the person. What's your advice in that regard? Because I'll admit after I lost my mom, I had dreams every night. She was in my dreams. For 3 months, she'd come to me in my dreams every night. And then all of a sudden it stopped. And every night it seemed like I was having a conversation with her. And it was comforting. And then it stopped, and I missed her. So just processing that and understanding what that means. It was nice to be able to see her in my dreams. It was comforting.
So for myself, I found it really helpful to go through this process with my children. Helpful and excruciating. Because kids are amazing. They say what's on their minds. And it's been 6 years. My youngest doesn't really remember Grandma, but yet they really want to talk to her or talk about her and ask questions. And I think that kind of thing is really helpful. And what I let them know is that she's our guardian angel. And my mom's mom, great-grandma, passed away last year. And similar, they knew her much better, a similar concept. I say, these are our guardian angels. We can talk to them anytime we want. And it can be at school, it can be in our prayers. We've all dreamt of them, and I think that's really normal and common. And we can write them letters. We can have memory boxes. We can, look at family photos. We also celebrate my mom's birthday every year, and that's really special. And there's so many ways that we can continue to, like you say, honor them as important parts of our lives. But it's okay if at some point we don't as much, too. But it's for me, holidays that are always the times when those memories are brought up. But it's great too, I think, to involve the children in remembering. It's healing for me anyway.
For me, I really struggle with my memory. I have a really poor memory. And for me, one thing that has really helped me, because I have a fear of always forgetting things, that, you know, photography has been a large part of my process and being creative. And so documenting like taking photos that remind me of something or trigger a memory has been a really large part of my process. Like when I was in the hospital 2 years ago after a suicide attempt, I documented myself in the hospital, and because I didn't want to forget that emotion. I didn't want to forget that feeling. And so photography has been a large part of that processing and my own grief. And so, yeah.
Add in that when we have our memories and we do worry about forgetting them, yes, we are going to forget little pieces here and there. One of the things we teach our kids, our teens and our adults, and anyone that works with us, is that it's also okay to remember the bad memories. We tend to always focus on all the best memories of our loved one, and that's really healthy. But occasionally a bad memory pops in, and that's okay too. Memories can also include the new memories, the new traditions we create. The way that we remember our loved one becomes now a memory, and that we can share with the rest of our family. But bad memories are okay too.
Yeah, I love what you said, Kimberly, just about incorporating the kids. And I feel like for me, I don't know, there's been some days my kids, their faith has just been so strong, and they've said these little things that have just completely taken my breath away. And my 6-year-old, not long after my dad had passed away, we were in the car driving somewhere, and he was just like, Mom, like grandpa's back, like grandpa's right here. And it was just like, he had a conversation. And you know, and some days it's hard because I almost don't know what to do with it, and it's kind of like, okay, and you know, that's great. And my daughter too, like she's same thing, right? Not too long after he passed away, she just said, you know, Mom, she said, time in heaven, it's different than here, and for Grandpa, he's going to see us again really soon. And so it's hard for us because we miss him, and time is a lot longer here, but Grandpa's fine, like he's okay. And I know for me too, after losing my dad, I struggled with it, just the why did this happen, and why are we going through this? And you know, when I see my dad again, you know, I'm going to ask him why he did this to us. And I had a couple dreams as well, and one was after kind of thinking that, and in my dream, it was so real, and my dad was there, and he was just happy, and he was healthy. And it was kind of as I remember him when I was a little bit younger, and I remember then kind of turning to him too, and just being, you know, saying, like, well, Dad, like, what, like, why are we going through this? And him just kind of saying, you know, my girl, because he would call me that, and like, I'm fine, I'm okay. And waking up with just this like amazing sense of peace and calm. And so I think that's hard. I still have moments like that where I'm at home, and my 1.5-year-old, it makes me really sad because he's not going to remember my dad. And I'll say to him, you know, Bodhi, where's Grandpa? And he looks towards our front door, because my dad did spend a lot of time at our house, and I've had to figure out how to hang pictures now, and how to do some yard work. And same thing in the summer after he had passed, my dad did kind of do yard work for us, and he had gotten some sort of like weed killer on his shoes, and his footprints were actually like burned into my grass. And same thing last year, I would just walk out into my backyard, and I would sit on my deck, and it's like I can see his footprints across my grass, right? And so it's just those little things. And so yeah, for us it's the pictures, and we put together a slideshow. And so yeah, I just try. People might think I'm crazy. I send it along to people. Here, watch this. This is my dad. But you know, just sitting down with the kids, and we watch it, and it's 3 songs, and it's like right from when he's like the first song is him growing up, the middle one is all of our family, and then the third one is him and my mom. And it just I cry, but it puts a smile on my face too. And so yeah, I just want to for me, it's just kind of remembering just to keep kind of doing those things because for me, yes, it's still very fresh, but yeah, just to kind of be able to keep talking about that with the kids and kind of hearing what they have to say and some of their memories where, yes, the pajama pants and in the cabin, Brooke said, Grandpa never really wanted to wear those. He was pretty grumpy about it. We kind of had our laugh about it. So they do share those memories without questioning.
It's amazing how fast time goes when you dig into a topic like this. And I want to close with this. It's been a brilliant discussion, but I want to give each of you the opportunity to make a final point on something that resonates with you or something that's important to you, or perhaps a message that you want to get out to anyone watching, listening, that is really close to your heart, that you've been working on, or communication that you really need to share that's important. So I'm going to open the floor up to you. And Blake, do you want to kick things off?
Sure. I think that my greatest piece of advice or belief is be vulnerable and at all times and be honest and open about where you're at and what you're feeling. I talk about that all the time in any presentation I do, and be vulnerable if you're not the person who's experiencing the grief, and be honest and open about what you're feeling, and I don't know how to help, but I want to help, but just continually to be vulnerable and state what you're feeling, because I always say it saves lives, and so I think it's really important. So,
thank you.
My personal belief is that our loved ones never really leave us, and so I often call on their wisdom and their strength when I'm going through things, and so I want people to feel okay doing that in our culture.
Thank you, Kimberly. Heidi?
I think there's so many things we've already touched on, but just being real through everything and letting go of expectations when you're going through grief, I think have been a really big thing for me on this journey. And like I said, I feel like now there is more good days than bad, but those other bad days do come as well. And I think for me, the one thing that's really kind of stuck out, and the one thing I'm trying to do more and more, is just to really live in the present and live in today. And I just feel like, I can't go back and I can't change the past, and I don't know what's going to happen in the future. And so it's just trying to be really present in the everyday with my kids, and just being thankful for all of the blessings that I have. And some days it's just that starting with that one sort of little positive, it's kind of like the only thing that gets me through my day, and you sort of just builds on that. So I think that would be it.
I think one of the things that really shows with this panel is that there's no bad question. There just is no bad question. So as a grieving person, to know that, right, and that there are so many different supports available through Edmonton and surrounding area, and it's to have the courage to reach out and find what works for you, what resonates, right? And the last part about supports, that if you invite people that are supportive to you, and you share memories of your loved one with them, and invite them to do that as well, your loved one stays alive then with you in a different way. And I'm always feel very fortunate, because that's how our daughter, it will be 19 years for us, we still have people that remember and phone. And I had a Haley moment today. That is powerful to me, and that's support.
I think the biggest thing that I like to share with my families and just the general public is grief is a journey. It's a lifetime. Someone we love has died. We will never forget them. It's a strength to seek support. Sometimes we feel like we're weak if we need to seek support, but in the end, it is a strength. For children and teens, they don't have the language to just sit and talk. We have to teach them that language, no matter their age. So to expect them to just be able to understand their grief with words isn't always what's best for them. But it is a journey, and it can have some really great gifts in it, but there's some really big stumbling and hard moments as well.
On that note, I think I will wrap by saying I think today has been therapeutic on many levels for all of us. Thank you to each and every one of you for weighing in with your thoughts, your expertise, your experiences, to being vulnerable, to being open, to being honest. It is just such a powerful way to learn from each other and to give each other permission that it's okay. It's courage at the end of the day. We are being courageous by talking and sharing our thoughts and our feelings on this subject. So to Cheryl, to Carmen, Heidi, Kimberly, and Blake, thank you so much for being with us today and for participating wholeheartedly on every single subject. I feel honored and I feel a heart full of gratitude that I was able to lead you through this discussion today. And on that note, I'm going to turn it back to Kirsty.
Thank you, Carrie. Wow, I learned a whole lot today. I certainly learned that it's okay for me to feel the way I feel, and I do need to express it more, and I do need to ask for help. And I think that's important for all of our community to take that home today. We certainly don't talk about how we're grieving and why we're feeling the way we are, and I think as a whole, as a society, that's a very important conversation we need to be having. So thank you so much for joining Park Memorial's live stream panel conversation today, focusing on the complicated relationship between grief and mental health. We hope that you have been inspired and encouraged by today's conversation. As mentioned, this event would not have been possible without the incredible support of our event partners. Thank you to our presenting sponsor and host, Lexus South Point. Your support shows uncommon corporate empathy and compassion. We honor your commitment in helping Park Memorial and our panelists generate connection, conversation, and understanding from your dealership outwards into the community. Thank you so much for being gracious hosts. Our thanks also goes to our panel of experts that have been here today. Thank you so much for giving your time to us. We're so grateful to have you here today. You're active advocates and support persons in our community. You brought real passion and an excellence and warmth and truth to our conversation today. Thank you, Cheryl Salter-Roberts, Carmen Victor, Blake Lotz, and Kimberly Knoll, and also to you, Heidi Wagner, and again, Carrie Doll. Heidi, especially for you, we know the recent loss of your dad, Ted, is very close to your heart, and we honor his memory with you today. You have allowed those listening today to feel less alone in your grief. Warm and hearty thank you again to you, Carrie, for lending your passion, for story and human connection through conversation to this event. Several times through our planning, we will hit full force with the knowledge that and comfort that you were the perfect moderator for this event. So we were so thankful to have you. Reminder that everyone listening today and afterwards can hear more from Carrie on her podcast, The Inner Circle with Carrie Doll. Today's conversations have been recorded and will be posted on our Facebook page at facebook.com/Park Memorial and on our YouTube channel at youtube.parkmemorialcares.com within 24 hours. Today's live stream event was created to engage our community in a vital and meaningful conversation, as well as to create awareness for a Finding Grace in Grief full-day event of practical grief support taking place at the Matrix Hotel on Friday, May 10th. We are honored to have had two of our event presenters for that day joining our panel of experts today. Again, Cheryl Salter-Roberts will be presenting a workshop focusing on supporting grieving children and teens, and Blake Lotz will be presenting a workshop in expressing grief through photography. If you have enjoyed their contribution to today's discussion and wish to engage further with them, please join us for this meaningful event. Details of this event and tickets can be found online at findinggraceingrief.com. Now, one of our virtual guests is about to win a ticket to Finding Grace in Grief. Thank you to all of you that have made comments today on YouTube and Facebook. Your comments have been genuine and sincere and straight from the heart. And we'd like to congratulate Peggy Zalis on YouTube. So thank you for your attending today and your engagement. You have won a ticket to our event on May 10th. Please give Christy Hammond a call at Park Memorial at 780-426-0050 to claim your prize, and we sure look forward to welcoming you that day. If, following today's event, you realize that you do require additional supports, please reach out to any of the following. Cheryl Salter-Roberts' organization, Pilgrim's Hospice. They provide barrier-free grief support for adults, children, and families, and they can be reached at 780-413-9801. Kimberly Knull's organization, Momentum Walk-In Counseling, they also provide barrier-free mental health support and can be reached at 780-757-0900. We will also share other community support groups and agencies via our social media channels. If your struggles are urgent in nature, or you feel that you or a loved one may be a danger to oneself, please call the Canadian Mental Health Crisis Support Line at 211 as soon as possible. On behalf of my Smolik family and our Park Memorial team, our sponsor and host, Lexus South Point, and our panel of excellence who have joined us here today, I close with the warmest of thanks for joining us today and an invitation to keep the conversation going on social media. We are active on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and would love to hear what inspired you today about this conversation about grief and mental health. Thank you.